It's a large and growing problem. The average girl that is trafficked in Canada produces for her trafficker about $300,000 a year. So it's a very lucrative business. There's lots of money involved, and so it's a difficult thing to tackle.
Conservative MP for the Northern Alberta riding of Peace River Westlock, Arnold Viersen, is one of 4 co-chairs of the all-party parliamentary group to end modern slavery and human trafficking. Now, ever since first being elected back in 2015, Viersen has been a staunch advocate for women and children. One of the very first things he did as a newly elected MP was to launch a study on the effects of pornography and the availability of pornography on children and their developing minds. Now, Viersen's also drawn a line between the Liberals' failings on many major issues like the border and the legalization of prostitution to the exploitation of the vulnerable. Viersen's pointed out that border communities tend to be a hotbed of human trafficking. And he's also pointed out that the decriminalization of sex work, as the left likes to call prostitution, has only led to greater victimization of those forced to participate in it. And now Viersen's taking on big tech and the companies that profit from images of sex crimes and sex trafficking. And Viersen joins me in an interview we recorded earlier in the week to discuss his work to protect victims of sex trafficking on and offline and what you can do to help. Check it out. Arnold, thanks for agreeing to this interview. And I'm so excited to talk about your work on the all-party parliamentary group to end modern slavery and human trafficking. First, I guess I'll ask you a bit of a personal question. How did you get into this? I mean, you're an MP from Northern Alberta, but human trafficking and I guess the effects of the porn industry have been on your radar from the very beginning.
Yeah, so I always say to every Canadian that asks me about this, like, is that really a problem in Canada? I always say human trafficking is happening within 10 minutes of where you live. I represent a large rural riding in Northern Alberta. In High Level, there was a human trafficking arrest this year up in High Level, up in Northern Alberta. So this does happen everywhere across Canada. I got elected in 2015, and I was given the opportunity to introduce a private member's bill. I was number 37 on that list, so it was up early back in when I first got elected. And I introduced a motion called M47, and that was to study the impacts of online sexually degrading material. And that led me to come into contact with groups from across the country who endorsed that motion. And it turned out one of the things that all those groups had in common was that they were fighting against human trafficking. And so after I had finished with that motion, it had gone through the House of Commons, I broadened out a little bit more to just fighting sexual exploitation in general, human trafficking, particularly sex trafficking more specifically. So that's how I kind of come to this spot in my career. It's a large and growing problem. The average girl that is trafficked in Canada produces for her trafficker about $300,000 a year. So it's a very lucrative business. There's lots of money involved, and so it's a difficult thing to tackle.
So I suppose it's hard to know the answer to this, but how big is the problem in Canada or North America?
So that's in terms of numbers, is very difficult to ascertain, right? The only people that will take that question on is a Dutch research company out of the Netherlands, and they estimate anywhere from like 6,000 to 15,000 people caught up in the sex trafficking industry in Canada. That's just based on a bunch of the research that they've done, and they have a bunch of indicators as to how many people are, and then they extrapolate from there. That is a difficult thing to measure. The other thing is that the human trafficking laws in Canada aren't that old. We passed the PASEPA bill back in 2013, and so in many cases, police departments are just pressing for the first time ever the charges around this bill. So it's a growing as awareness for human trafficking grows. So does the RCMP and the local police forces using the law in order to press charges. And so it's the rate at which people are charged with it continues to go up, but we don't know the total scope of the size of it. What we do know is that of the victims that are helped and rescued out of sex trafficking in particular, 50% of them are First Nations. And so it's a great travesty that we have this going on in Canada. And I work every day to try to prevent the expansion of human trafficking across this country and around the world.
Now, I don't really think that this should be a political issue, ending human slavery and human trafficking. However, you have pointed out in the past that a lot of the human trafficking we see happening in Canada is happening in our border towns. And we know that the Liberals have truly failed at the border. So what is the solution to ending the trafficking that's happening at the border?
Cross-border trafficking continues to be a major challenge. Cross-provincial boundaries is also a thing that it's a lucrative business, and like anything else that's illegal and lucrative, they will find a way around. Border measures are important. That's ensuring that we have, but also just being able to identify it. And so one of the areas that I see a big positive is in the city of Calgary. There is a group or an organization called Not in My City, and they are a not-for-profit organization. Their public face of it is country music singer Paul Brandt, and they've rolled out training for airport staff in the Calgary airport to be able to identify folks that are being trafficked, to say, hey, that something doesn't seem quite right there. I would love to see something similar be rolled out for the border security guards as people are coming across the border, that they would be able to say, this person might be trafficked. The other thing is that we have a national strategy to end human trafficking that has been unfunded since 2017. So we've been we are living without a national strategy. The government has now announced a new national strategy, but we have yet to see. They've announced it. They've put money behind it, but we've yet to see it being fleshed out into actually what are the programs that are going to be funded of it. We have seen funding cut to several organizations that most notably for me is the London Women's Abuse Center, who I work very closely with to advance the cause of victims of human trafficking. Their funding has been cut, and they've been fairly critical of the government, and so they're suspicious that their funding got cut because of their criticism. But that's a whole nother story.
Now, I suppose in response to these federal government funding cuts to those organizations and those programs meant to fight human trafficking in Alberta, we sort of have a provincial human trafficking program, and Paul Brandt is also the face of that. Are there other programs ramping up in other provinces to address this sort of, I guess, deficit of programs now because of the federal funding cuts?
The Ontario government recently announced a $300 million plan, which got accolades from all the people that I work with. It's a substantial plan. They also have their en route plan. So the en route is their big major highways have a network of food courts essentially, and they've worked really well with the provincial government there as well to combat human trafficking, be able to identify it, and also work to feed in information into the national hotline. So the PC government in Ontario is doing great work in it. Jason Kenney in Alberta is definitely picking up the slack where the federal government is dropping the ball. But yeah, when you say that this is like a nonpartisan issue, I think the all-party group that I'm a co-chair of really proves that out. And so while the government of the day is not overly interested in, or it seems to be coming along kicking and screaming, we have been able to get people from every party to endorse some of the things that we've been working on.
You know, I think that's a really important point to make, that there are some Liberal MPs who firmly believe in combating human trafficking. And, you know, it's unfortunate that they can't build some momentum within the caucus to move the government in the right direction. And that's the next thing I wanted to talk to you about. And I think part of the reason a lot of people don't know about what we're about to talk about is because there hasn't been a lot of Canadian media coverage of sites like Pornhub. You've also been critical of Backpage.com and the parent company of Pornhub, MindGeek. You know, in the United States, the Republicans are getting a lot of play in the media for their criticism of Pornhub. But not so much here in Canada. And I think it's really interesting because Justin Trudeau has said he's going to regulate the internet when it comes to independent media outlets and people who say things about him that he doesn't like. But he hasn't really moved the needle on these sites that profit every single day from sex crimes, because at the end of the day, that's what this really is.
Yeah, and so it's interesting. I've signed a letter with 20 other members of parliament and senators calling on the government to prosecute or at least investigate these allegations that survivors have brought forward to me around Pornhub and MindGeek. Interestingly, an American senator, Ben Sass, raised the same concern in the United States, and the New York Times picked both of us up last week. And so suddenly the government is concerned about this issue. So it's now on the Canadian radar. Canada is getting a black eye over the fact that Pornhub is headquartered right here and continues to seemingly operate with impunity while hosting illegal activity, videos of illegal activity. Like if this was anything else, people would be getting charged over it. And there doesn't seem to be any interest by the government to deal with it. Interestingly, the MindGeek says that they're just a platform. They don't monitor the content that goes onto there unless somebody complains about it. However, when people put up videos that are critical of MindGeek or Pornhub on Pornhub, those videos somehow come down within minutes. And so we're saying, well, if you don't monitor it, you seem to monitor it when it's something critical about you. That said, we're looking for the government to do some investigations. I think that in the United States, there is a class action lawsuit getting started against Pornhub of survivors of sex trafficking who have been videos have been taken of them and they've been uploaded to Pornhub. We've seen folks that have been gone to the gym and have had videos taken of them while they unbeknownst to them being uploaded to Pornhub. That has been taken down as well. They're just an awful organization, and it's a blight on Canada that they are headquartered here.
Yeah, they truly do profit from just human suffering and misery. And I've seen accounts where, you know, people will complain to Pornhub about, you know, revenge porn going up and they'll take it down, but it'll be re-uploaded the next day. And so there's truly no escape for some of these victims. Arnold, I wanted to ask you, how will the legalization of prostitution in Canada feed into the social catastrophe of sex trafficking?
So I have met with a bunch of ambassadors from Africa lately, and that's just questioning them about how does human trafficking affect them? Are they source countries? Are they destination countries? All of that kind of thing. One of the interesting things, as they point out, is that since the legalization of prostitution in Germany, Germany just seems to be the place where all their girls end up. It's because it's legal there, the risks for the business are lower. like I said earlier, the average girl who's being trafficked brings in $300,000 a year to their traffickers. You would like to do it in a place where the cost of doing business is much lower, and that's Germany in particular. The Open Societies Foundation, you may have heard of those folks before, Sheila. I'm sure all of your listeners are familiar with them as well. They're kind of the George Soros front group. They are very much pushing legalization of prostitution around the world, and I get to watch in real time as they're successful with that. So I think it's one of the states in Australia has now legalized prostitution. Germany was kind of the first one. Legalize, decriminalize. I use that term kind of interchangeably, but I guess it's probably more decriminalize. And then New Zealand recently as well decriminalized prostitution. And we see them, that the folks that make the case that it should be decriminalized to reduce the stigma and all that kind of stuff. Yeah, that they claim that it will not affect human trafficking at all. We've seen the opposite happen. We've seen, in many cases, the folks that are in prostitution when the legalization happens, many of them get out, but they're just purely replaced by folks that are then trafficked in from outside. And a guy named Victor Malarick, he's done amazing research on this. He's a former W5 investigative journalist, and he's got like horrific stories of what this all does. The liberals that here in Canada, the youth wing of the Liberal Party, voted at their last convention for decriminalization of prostitution. Right here in Canada, if we want to become America's brothel, that's exactly what we should do: decriminalize prostitution. I don't want Canada to become America's brothel, and so I fight every day to prevent that from happening.
Arnold, how do normal people get involved? I mean, you're an MP. You have a different platform, but how do normal people who feel compelled to do something to help stem this tide of human slavery in the modern age, how do they get involved, and how do they make a difference?
The first and most important way is stop looking at porn. It doesn't matter where you are in the world. I always say porn is to human trafficking like cigarettes are to cancer, and that's we got to end the demand for these sexual services, and one of the big marketing material is porn. Beyond that, continue to lobby governments. You can sign up at if you come and visit my website at Arnold Viersen MP. You can check that out. You can just Google my name. The government of Canada will get you to my contact information, no problem. And you can keep in touch there. Join a local organization. You live in Calgary, get involved with Not in My City. Several of these similar organizations across the country work fighting human trafficking all across the country. Get aware of it. The other thing is make yourself aware of the fact that human trafficking is happening within 10 minutes of where you live. Keep your eyes and ears open. If something doesn't seem right, probably it's not right. Be prepared to call the human trafficking hotline. If you don't know who to call, just call 911 and say you suspect somebody's being trafficked. That is a major concern. So be able to identify some of the indicators of it and work to help identify it.
Well, Arnold, I want to thank you for the work that you're doing, and thank you so much for taking the time to talk to me today.
Sheila, it's always a pleasure.
Thanks. Sex trafficking is happening in all of our communities. It disproportionately affects women and girls, and it also disproportionately affects women from marginalized communities like Indigenous women. And yet it doesn't seem very high on Justin Trudeau's radar. And that's strange to me because he keeps telling me he's a feminist. For Rebel News, I'm Sheila Gunn-Reid. At Rebel News, it's our job to tell the other side of the story the mainstream media just doesn't want to talk about, like Arnold's work to combat sex trafficking. It's big news in the New York Times, but it's not big news on the CBC. Now, if you'd like to help us tell the other side of the story, one of the best ways, Doesn't cost you a dime. Just like and share this video. Make sure you're subscribed to our YouTube channel and ring the little bell so you never miss an important story like this one today.